Here we go, guys. It's time to rank the 5 studio albums from Australian rockers Silverchair. These 5 albums date over a 12-year span from their debut in 1995 up to their final album, which they released in 2007. And I tell you, there are some real close calls in here, especially for the number 1 and 2 spots, so let's get into it. Coming in at number 5, we have the final album that Silverchair put out, and that is Young Modern. Now, just because this one is at number 5 on the list doesn't make this a bad album. It's actually quite a cool album. It's pretty good. But it is quite different from early Silverchair material. In fact, it's completely different. It's almost like a completely new band in some ways. No grunge, hard, heavy rock riffs. The band is much more mellow here in their style. Kind of more of a mellow rock album, I guess you could call it, something like that. But there are some great Silverchair songs on here, there really are. Straight Lines, the first single release, that's a really good song. Also, Reflections of a Sound, another single from the album, cool song too. And then you've got this real interesting mashup of songs with Those Thieving Birds, Part 1, and that goes into the song Strange Behavior, and then we kind of turn things back to Those Thieving Birds, Part 2, and it all kind of mashes into one big song. It is very well done, a very cool idea and concept here. So this is the one Silverchair album that really sticks out. It's totally different from all the other albums. It was their first full album release in 5 years, and the band came back with something totally different than they had ever done before. And that's Young Modern, and that's number 5. Now, this one was a really tough choice for number 4, but I've gone with 1999's Neon Ballroom. An absolutely awesome album, totally epic. Daniel Johns has said of this album that in a lot of ways, this is like the first real Silverchair album. It was a new sound for the band. You had heavy rock being combined with piano and orchestral parts. And what you came out at the end of this one was just like a total work of art. This album really was that. Daniel started singing different on this album too. He sang in the falsetto. However, still maintained a really awesome, hard, edgy grunge voice on this album too. Actually, probably Daniel's best vocal performance from any Silverchair record. So you have a great array of songs on this album. I mean, the first 5 tracks here, they're all great. With Emotion Sickness, Anthem for the Year 2000, and so forth. All standout songs. And then coming down to tracks like Satin Sheets and Steam Will Rise, great songs. Many people will have this album higher on their list, understandably, but for me it sits at number 4, and we're going to go check out the album that just edged it out at number 3. Let's go do it. And at number 3, it is 2002's Diorama. A very close call for me between this and Neon Ballroom, but I'm putting Diorama at number 3. I was lucky enough to see these guys play live while they were touring this album, and they were totally awesome band live. Now, barring the first 2 Silverchair albums, which were pretty much straight up heavy rock grunge, each release after that, Silverchair always seemed to do something different in each album, and that's something that Daniel Johns always prided himself on, was to be different in every album that they made. And they were different here again, just like they were on Neon Ballroom. Now, even though there are some heavier moments on this album, it certainly isn't as hard out as their earlier stuff. But the band still do rock it out on the tracks One Way Mule and The Lever. Some cool, heavy riffs there. Daniel Johns wrote most of this album on the piano as opposed to the guitar. So this album is much more known for its orchestral arrangements and power ballads. So some really great songs here with the likes of Across the Night, The Greatest View, Without You, Tuna in the Brine, and Love Your Life, great songs as well. What you could even call as Silverchair's masterpiece. That's Diorama, and that's number 3 for me. And coming in at number 2, and this was the hardest decision of them all. It's pretty much a tie here with number 1 and 2. But at number 2, I'm going with the band's debut that came out in 1995, and that is Frog Stomp. This album is awesome, especially the first half of this album is totally amazing, especially for like 14 and 15-year-old kids, teenagers, right? To come up with songs like Israel's Son, Tomorrow, Pure Massacre. Unbelievable. Ben Gillies, 15 years old, drums amazingly on this album. Just awesome rock drumming, totally awesome fills that he comes up with here. Daniel Johns with the singing and songwriting, all three of these guys here, just unbelievable. This is the band's biggest selling album, their most successful record they ever put out. And when they came out on the scene with this in 1995, they just blew everybody away. Everybody was just taken back at how amazing the sound was that was coming out of these young kids. As I say, some of their biggest and best ever songs come from this album with Israel's Son, Tomorrow, and Pure Massacre. You got other great tracks on there like Shade, Madman, the hard rock instrumental, very cool. Could have easily been #1 on this list, and all in all, just a totally awesome debut album here from Silverchair. So that just leaves one album, of course, and that is the 1997 release from the band, and that is Freak Show. Pretty much a tie, actually, for me if I look at Freak Show and Frog Stomp, but I'll put Freak Show at #1 here. As awesome as their first album was, this one's even more heavier and more grungier. They even started to implement the use of strings on a couple of their songs, most notably Cemetery and Petrol and Chlorine, to great effect. So the band were really just developing and moving on from that Frog Stomp sound. An extra 2 tracks on this album, you had it bulked up to 13 tracks as opposed to 11 on Frog Stomp, so... And for me, just so much to like on this album. From the opening track, you're just totally hooked. That first song, Slave. They did it with Israel's Son on their debut album, and they did it again here on Freak Show. Just a totally awesome track to open up the album. And the song, I think, that got everybody hooked at the time, it is Freak. This one was huge for the band. Simple, awesome opening riff, kick-ass song. As I say, simple and effective, powerful and awesome. Cool music video to go with that one as well. Abuse Me, another big hit from the album. Lie to Me, love that track. The next 2 songs, No Association and Cemetery, again, amazing tracks. No Association, hard, heavy, sludge, rock. Some amazing riffage and timing with the band on this album. The stop-starts, the tempo changes they go into, they're so tight on this album. Cemetery, that acoustic song, again, another real cool music video to that one as well. Just showed some real amazing growth for the band on a track like that. The Door, another popular song from this album. More good quality songs here with tracks like Learn to Hate and Petrol and Chlorine. The epic Nobody Came, the longest track on the album at just over 6 minutes. And the final track on the album, very appropriately named, of course, The Closing. That one co-wrote by Daniel Johns and Ben Gillies, who co-wrote several songs on this album. And in some ways, for me, I guess this album is just a step up from Frog Stomp. It's a bit more deeper, a bit more heavier overall. Was just the next step up and the natural progression from Frog Stomp. And for me, that's gonna be my #1 on the list, Freak Show. So there you go, guys. That's how it all stacks up for me on my Silverchair top 5 list. Want to see your lists down below and how you rank them? The band only did those 5 studio albums, and it's kind of tough tearing them apart when you look at them. Coming up with a final ranking, as I say, they're all good albums. It's a pity the band couldn't have done more together. I really prefer their hard and heavy edge, most definitely. I like their earlier stuff. It's a pity they couldn't have done a bit more like that and just kept it hard and heavy, but that's the way it goes. Daniel Johns was always wanting to progress and change his sound from album to album, so that's how it goes. But the stuff we got was damn awesome anyway. So, as always, thanks heaps, guys, for tuning in. Be sure to leave us a big thumbs up on the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Also, consider hitting that applaud button down below and becoming a member of the channel. There's more information on that down below, and we'll catch you on the next one, guys.